Thank you very much, Paddy. If you want to join me on the stage here, and we'll have the other panellists join us as well. And that's really some numbers jumping out at me, you know, remarking on the progress that you were showing there, 50% reduction in our carbon intensity over a 15-year period, but moving into a space where you're seeing 60 grams per kilowatt hours, this is completely transformational. So that was really a great start to set us up in terms of the scale of the pace and the change that is required, and building on everything that's happened to date. So I'm going to go on now and invite our first panellist up to give his remarks. I'll introduce you, Robert. Robert Burns is the Director of Housing and Community Development in Fingal County Council, and he has been there since January 2022. He's responsible for the management of a stock of over 6,000 social houses and the delivery of new houses and apartments. And before joining Fingal County Council, Robert was Director for Service for Infrastructure and Climate Change, with responsibility for the management and delivery of infrastructure, public realm, active travel, and climate-related projects. So I think he is in a perfect position to talk to us really around the theme of today, which is moving from planning to doing and implementation. So over to you, Robert.
Okay, thank you, Emer, and thank you for the invitation from the EPA. Delighted to be here and give you my perspective, if you like, on the challenges that we're facing. They're quite significant. I am an optimist by nature, so I think it's doable. I think we have shown the potential, and I think we can do more. And I hope today that I'll be able to demonstrate by some of the projects I worked on over the last few years what that potential might be. So I am not actually going to go through that, because I think you've all seen the set piece and the policy and the cascade, and we all know how it works together. There's lots of policy. I suppose the challenge is moving from planning to doing. It's what we all know. It's probably how today started off for many of us listening to the radio in the morning about the challenges that lie ahead and how we are at risk of not meeting our targets, or we'll need to do more to meet our targets. What I will add to this is, I suppose, that my area of knowledge, if you like, and what I can speak with some authority on is probably on sustainable transport, housing, and implementing policy. So my role as a director in the local authority is to implement national and local policy that's set by government or by councillors at a local level. And it's really set out there. And I've worked a lot on active travel projects, so it's a relatively recent programme, probably in the last few years, came in with the most recent government. And we know all about the €1 million per day spent on active travel. It's quite catchy, it's a good soundbite, lots of resources in place. And the new Climate Action Plan actually sets out another target, which is 500,000, or a reduction of 500,000 in car journeys, and shifting to other more sustainable modes, walking, cycling, and public transport. And I just ask you to think about that 500,000 deferred journeys, or journeys that don't happen because of alternative means, and how we might achieve it. Because 500,000 per day is a lot for one country. But I might just explore and see how it is actually doable, and maybe we're on our way to doing it already. One of the things I'm always interested in is where you start. And if you were dealing with councillors or with the public or starting off a project, you probably wouldn't start in the middle of it and say, I'm building a new cycle lane in the middle of X town. You would try to set the scene. You would say, well, what is my overall plan? What's my overall vision? And really here, you're trying to work from the whole to the part. And this works for me. I think it works for a lot of people. And it works for staff as well, to know how they fit into all of this. Are they the cog in the wheel? Are they that piece in the jigsaw? And this picks up from some of the presentations earlier. You need to anchor your plans. It's usually in the county development plan. Within that, you have local area plans, urban framework plans, and for Dún Laoghaire, when I worked there, that's what we had. And it's very clearly set out what we were trying to achieve. So it wasn't something that was done on the hoof. It actually gone through a very rigorous democratic process as well, involving public consultation. So you're actually following through on what people said or asked you to do. But we did a lot of this work during COVID, and even though we did it quickly and we reacted in a short time frame, we were always conscious of what is the big picture, what's the overall plan. And one of the projects we worked on last year, which is in the urban framework, was the pedestrianization of Dundee. Any of you that were out there last summer, we did a trial over 3 months. We did it in a very quick build fashion, so we put down new surfacing, we put in temporary planting, we put in a lot of seeding, we worked with businesses to get them out onto the street. And so it's about climate change, but it's actually about a lot more. It's about the livability of our towns, it's about activating them, it's about more social activity, it's about more economic activity. And the research is clearly showing that that's much more economically beneficial for towns, and not only from a climate perspective. And I suppose the fruit of that, in a sense, is that the council, and I'm no longer working with them, but they have made a decision to make that permanent next year, so they'll be going ahead with a permanent scheme. So it shows you the advantage of piloting or trialling, it showed the possibilities. And when we did that at the time, we put in a very rigorous regime of monitoring, air quality, noise monitoring, traffic, footfall. So we were able to compare before, during and after data, and that was very useful in terms of helping to make decisions, and I'll come back to that just in a minute. And again, this is a question I've posed at presentations before, and it's about the idea of framing. So if people are asked a certain question, don't be surprised if you just get that certain response. And so cycle lanes those two words seem to trigger people. They're always in headlines, and it's either people are very much for it or against it. But what if you just turn that around and said, well, look, rather than just asking about, do you want the cycle lanes in your town? And this is a simplified question, of course. Would you like your village or town to have less traffic, more visitors, nicer public spaces, and to be a place where it is easier and safer to walk around and cycle? And probably more likely to answer in the positive to the second one than the first one. And I think that goes back to that overarching vision. You're saying, what is the town about? What's it for? I think what's really interesting here is you start to link strategies and policies. So you start to link sustainable transport with climate change, with town centres first, and with housing for all. A much more traffic-calmed, attractive town is a much nicer place to live in. So you might be able to tackle dereliction through that approach. So it's more than just one thing. And I suppose this, one of the things we probably best known for in Dundee over the last few years is this new coastal mobility route. Again, there's probably an element of branding in that as well to give it a catchy name. And so that was built over 3 months in the summer of 2020, designed in a number of weeks. And I suppose this gets to the heart of doing things quickly and effectively. So we were able to do that. During COVID, of course, that had its challenges too. It wasn't all that easy. It's relatively low cost, just over $500,000 per kilometre. You won't build many roads for about 15 million a kilometre. So it goes to show you the difference in it. And just in terms of its use, we were seeing about 20,000 cyclists per week, before about 4,000, but a much safer environment as well. Now I'm going to go back to that 500,000 journeys per day. Can you get 500,000 people to not use their car? So look at this. So 15,000 people, you could argue, are not using their car because now they're cycling on that route. If we look at each local authority, there's 31, and we split that 500,000 between them, that's about 15 or 16,000 journeys per day per local authority. I know that's kind of a bit of a simplification, that urban areas should be doing more, but if we split it in that way, so you have 15 or 16,000 journeys per day you're trying to get to avoid taking place. That route in itself, you know, if you look at it per day, it's about 2,500 journeys that are avoided, car journeys that are avoided. So already, Dundee right down, with just one 5-kilometre route, is able to meet 25% of those deferred journeys or avoided journeys. So it's a way of looking at it. And if you get 5 of those routes in the county, and if you multiply that across each, then you can see how that 500,000 would build up. And it compares very favourably to other locations. And really what's at the heart of this and what made this possible is that there was a route, one of the roads was taken out and it was made one way. It's essentially about reallocation of space. We heard that mentioned earlier on. What's the best use of space? And reallocation of road space is really where we need to look at. And it's a pilot project. It's a trial project. And I'd argue that project has much more value as a communications project than an infrastructure project. It shows the potential, it shows what can happen. I was looking at some of the presentations earlier, and people were showing photographs of this project. I see new projects coming out, and that's on the front of them saying, well, we're building X, Y, and Z. So this resonates. You add to that the experience of people on the route. They're not looking at a 2D drawing and wondering how they're going to feel about it. They're actually on it. They're experiencing the safety, experience the joy of cycling, being able to bring their family out with them, something they may not have been able to do before. So it really does show the value of it. And that's the value of trialling and pilots, and I'll come back to that just in a minute. Engagement and collaboration, I think, has been a theme here today. I would argue that our traditional engagement model probably isn't fit for purpose. We effectively present almost a fully finished project design to the public, and we ask them to comment. I'm not sure really what we're asking them to okay it, to rubber stamp it. We should be going in earlier with maybe the principle or an outline of it and looking not only at the issues, but the opportunities. We're always talking about issues. We never look at the opportunities, not as much as we should anyway. And I believe that maybe a more dynamic model is what we could do. I think just in terms of the engagement, we look to do it early and often. There is an issue around the softness of support. It may come up in the discussion, but my key point would be that we need to look at a formal system of trialling. It isn't in place in legislation at the moment. I understand the government is looking at it, but that needs to be embedded in legislation in my view. It is in the UK. And academic engagement and research and evidence-based approach is really crucial. And that's just my last slide. We worked collaboratively with TU Dublin to do a full evaluation of all of our projects. And now we have this definitive, independent information that's there that can be scrutinized by others. And it deals with challenges like misinformation, people who want to present their own view or working on vague information to try and maybe undermine projects. It's quite easy to come back to this. And again, this isn't just about the mobility or the sustainable transport. It looks like things like the Healthy Cities Check, which is a London-based approach that looks at the overall health of a town or a city centre. So it's a very interesting way of doing it, and you can actually compare each town in that way. So my apologies, Imran, I've run over. So that's the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Robert.